I watched them reprogram Kanye West, and in that moment, the man I knew was gone. It wasn't some PR stunt, some artistic transformation. It was much darker than that. What happened next wasn't just a change in behavior. It was a complete erasure of who he was. The Kanye we all knew, the genius, the icon, was stripped away by a force beyond his control. The real Kanye begged me for help. But by then, it was already too late. This is the story no one will ever believe, but it's one you need to hear. The call came in like any other, but it felt different. There was an oddness to it, something in the air that I couldn't shake. Kanye wanted to meet. Not just a regular studio session, not a creative catch-up. No, this time it was different. The invite was vague, cryptic almost. "I'm doing something groundbreaking," he said, his voice distant, almost robotic. "I need you to witness it. You're the only one I trust to see it." It wasn't the usual brash, confident Kanye I'd come to know. Something was off. I should have questioned it. I should have hesitated. But it was Kanye after all, one of the most creative minds of our time. A man who pushed boundaries so far, they practically snapped. I couldn't resist. When I arrived at the address, I noticed the building. It was sleek, modern, almost too perfect. The cold steel doors loomed in front of me as I pressed the intercom. No response. Just a click, then a soft whir of the door unlocking. Something about that sound sent a shiver down my spine. The moment I stepped inside, I knew. The atmosphere was heavy. Not in a physical sense. No, it was more than that. It was like the air had been charged with something I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was the silence or the coldness of the walls, but it felt as if the world outside didn't exist. The only thing that mattered now was Kanye. And I was walking into a situation that would change everything. The first thing I noticed when I entered was Kanye. He was standing in the center of a room, but this was not the Kanye I knew. His posture was stiff, almost like he was a mannequin, his hands clasped together, his eyes vacant. His usual spark was nowhere to be found. He seemed distant, as if the room held no significance to him, as if he wasn't really there at all. "Hey," I said, trying to gauge his mood, but my voice echoed strangely in the room. It was a sterile, almost clinical space, like a lab or a research facility. There were machines humming quietly in the background. Strange tech equipment I didn't recognize scattered around. But I didn't question it. At least, not yet. Kanye didn't immediately respond. It was like he hadn't even heard me. But then, slowly, he turned his head and locked eyes with me. His gaze was blank, his expression unreadable. "Glad you could make it," he said. His voice so smooth, so calculated. It was as if the words were rehearsed. "I've been working on something. Something big. You're gonna be a part of it." I took a step closer, but something made me hesitate. This wasn't the Kanye I'd come to admire. There was no fire in his eyes, no sign of the brilliant, eccentric genius I'd always known. Instead, there was an unsettling calm. Too calm, like he was under someone's control. "What's going on, Kanye? You don't seem... You? This doesn't feel like a typical session." His lips twitched, as though he was about to smile, but then stopped, his expression freezing again. "It's all part of the process. This is gonna take me to the next level. You'll see." The way he said it, the way he acted, it was like watching someone who had been swallowed by the world around them.
The man I knew had vanished, and in his place stood someone, or something else. I should have turned around, walked out, but instead, I stood frozen, compelled to see where this would go. Maybe I thought it was just a phase, that the old Kanye would snap back. I didn't know. But what I did know was that I had stepped into something bigger than I could understand. He motioned for me to follow him. Without a word, I obeyed. He led me down a narrow hallway to a door at the end. I noticed the flickering of lights, the strange hum of machines, and it was only when the door slid open that I saw the full extent of what was waiting inside. There was a chair. No, not just a chair. It was a contraption, sleek and metallic, with wires and electrodes attached to it. It looked like something out of a science fiction movie. Kanye walked over to it like it was second nature, sitting down without a hint of hesitation. The moment he settled into the seat, I noticed the technicians around him. Their eyes were hidden behind masks, their movements cold and deliberate, as if they were more concerned with their work than with Kanye's well-being. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly now. There was a lump in my throat, an instinct telling me to run, but I couldn't move. The room felt like a trap, and I had already walked too far into it. Kanye's eyes flickered to mine, and for the briefest moment there was a flash of recognition, a glimpse of the man I once knew, but it was gone before I could say anything. "I need this," he said. "This is who I'm supposed to be. This is my next evolution." I didn't understand, but I couldn't walk away now. I had to see this through. The room was silent as the technicians began to work, wiring him up, preparing the machine for whatever came next. But that's when it hit me. The sheer terror in the air, the unsettling feeling that something had gone terribly wrong. I had watched Kanye push boundaries his entire career, but this was different. This was no creative leap forward. This was the beginning of something far darker, something irreversible. The hum of the machine grew louder. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. And as Kanye's eyes locked with mine, I realized whatever was about to happen, I was already in too deep to stop it. The machine roared to life, and I felt the air shift. What happened next would change Kanye forever. And me, too. The hum of the machine grew louder, vibrating through the floor, shaking me to my core. Every instinct I had screamed at me to stop, to pull Kanye away from the cold metal contraption and get the hell out of that room. But I couldn't. I was frozen, trapped in a moment that felt like it had been ripped straight from a nightmare. Kanye didn't resist. He didn't even flinch. His eyes, those vacant, hollow eyes, stared straight ahead, as if he was ready for whatever this was. I glanced at the technicians, their faces hidden behind surgical masks, their eyes cold and focused. They were so calm, too calm. It was like they were just carrying out another routine procedure, like they'd done this 1,000 times before. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just stepped into something far beyond my understanding. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat, but it wouldn't go away. "Kanye," I started, my voice barely a whisper, unsure if he could hear me over the sound of the machine. "Are you sure about this? This doesn't feel right." For a split second, he turned his head toward me, those same blank eyes locking onto mine. His lips parted, and for the first time, his voice wavered. "I need this. You'll see. It's the only way forward."
His words didn't reassure me. They terrified me even more. The Kanye I knew, the man who lived for pushing limits, who thrived on chaos and revolution, was no longer the one speaking. This was someone else. Someone controlled. The man in front of me wasn't acting like himself. I could feel it in my bones. He wasn't here, not entirely. The technician closest to Kanye tapped something on the screen, and I could see the soft glow of lights flicker across his face. Then came the sound, the unmistakable hum of machinery activating, followed by a sharp electronic buzz that filled the room. The lights overhead flickered once, then again, and for a brief moment, everything went completely dark. I felt my pulse race, my hands clammy with fear. The silence stretched out, and in the pitch black, I couldn't even hear Kanye's breathing. And then, like an explosion in the dark, the lights blazed back to life and the machine roared to full power. Kanye's body twitched in the chair, almost imperceptibly at first, like a reaction to a slight jolt. But then, his fingers clenched and his head jerked forward. His eyes locked onto me again, but there was something different in them. Something not him?
It wasn't a look of confusion anymore. It was cold, clinical, controlled. I felt my stomach drop. Whatever was happening to Kanye wasn't just physical, it was mental. His very essence, his soul, was being torn apart by whatever this was. I stepped closer, but the technicians held me back. Their gloved hands gripped my arms firmly, as if to warn me to stay out of it. I tried to pull away, but the grip tightened.
"Let him go!" I yelled, my voice rising, fear and panic creeping into every word. But the technicians didn't flinch. They didn't even look at me.
"This is for the best," one of them muttered, his voice muffled by the mask. "It's the future."
The future? What future? What was I witnessing here? This wasn't the future. It was a nightmare. This wasn't evolution. It was destruction. I watched in horror as Kanye's body convulsed in the chair, his head jerking back, then forward again, as though his mind was being ripped in two. His lips parted, and a strangled sound escaped. Barely a whisper, but there was no mistaking the terror in it. I can't, he gasped. "What are you doing to me?" His voice was raw, desperate, like a man drowning. I had never heard him sound like that before. It was as if the real Kanye was fighting to resurface, to break through the machine's hold. But it was too late. The technicians pressed a few more buttons on the console, and the sound of the machine shifted. A high-pitched whine filled the air, and I could see Kanye's body go rigid, as if he was frozen in place. I stepped forward again, this time ignoring the technicians' hands as they tried to stop me. I reached out, trying to touch Kanye's shoulder, but my hand hesitated inches away. I didn't want to touch him. I didn't want to be the one to make it worse. Then, his eyes snapped open. They were wide now, his pupils dilated in fear. The faintest flicker of recognition passed through them, just for a moment, but it was quickly replaced by something else. A cold, emotionless stare. The man in front of me was gone. And what remained? A perfect, empty shell. Kanye's head slumped forward, and he exhaled a long, shuddering breath. It was like a curtain had been drawn over his soul, and whatever had been left of him was erased in that one gut-wrenching moment. The technician leaned in close, typing something on a tablet. "It's done," he said softly, almost dismissively.
I looked back at Kanye, but he didn't respond. His chest rose and fell steadily, but it was like he was a different person now. A mannequin. A lifeless copy of the man I knew. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw everything I could at that machine. I wanted to drag Kanye out of that chair and tell him to snap out of it. But I knew it was already too late. The real Kanye was gone. And what was left wasn't a man. It was a product. A tool. I staggered back, my breath coming in shallow gasps. This wasn't just about Kanye anymore. This was about something bigger, something darker. A force had entered our world, and it was changing everything we knew about control, about identity, about who we were. But I couldn't walk away. I couldn't leave him like this. I had to know what came next. I had to see what they had done to him. What came next was the hardest part. I'd seen the change, but I didn't know the true cost of it until I uncovered the tech company's true plan. And that's when the nightmare started to get worse.
The days following Kanye's reprogramming felt like an eternity. I tried to keep myself busy, tried to convince myself that the man I knew wasn't gone, just altered. But every time I saw Kanye, I couldn't shake the unease. The change was profound. It was like watching a brilliant, shining light dim into nothing. The Kanye who had once been a whirlwind of ideas and unfiltered emotion was now a shadow, a blank slate. He wasn't angry anymore, not like he used to be. There was no fire, no passion. He spoke with a robotic calmness that was both unnerving and chilling. His creativity, once so raw and untamed, was now methodical, sterile, like someone had cut out the very essence of what made him an artist.
I spent hours in that sterile room with him, trying to talk to him, trying to find the spark that had once ignited the world. But every time I tried, I was met with cold indifference. He would nod, speak a few words, but it was like he wasn't really there, like his soul had been erased and replaced with something far more controlled, far more manageable. At first, I thought maybe it was just a temporary side effect, something that would wear off. But after a week, the reality set in. This wasn't a side effect. This wasn't a phase. This was who he was now. I tried to confront the technicians, the ones who had carried out the procedure, but they just brushed me off. It's a process, one of them said, as if reprogramming a human being was just a normal part of the job. You'll see. It's for the better. For the better? How could they say that with a straight face? The Kanye I knew had been swallowed whole, consumed by this cold, clinical version of himself. I could still hear the faint whispers of the real Kanye, the cries for help that he had barely been able to choke out. I don't remember. What have they done to me? Those words echoed in my mind over and over. It was like they had planted a seed of doubt in him, a doubt that he couldn't escape no matter how hard he tried. The worst part? Kanye knew it too. He would look at himself in the mirror, his expression blank, his gaze distant. I could see the terror behind his eyes, the realization that he was no longer in control. But the machine had already taken root, and it was too late to reverse it. The real Kanye fought back, but it was like trying to hold back a tsunami with your bare hands. His mind was slipping, and every attempt he made to hold on to who he once was met with resistance. It was as if the programming had created a barrier between him and his true self. And the more he fought, the more the system pushed back. One night, while we were alone in the room, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. It was brief, but it was enough to make my heart skip a beat. For a split second, Kanye was back. The old Kanye. The one who wasn't afraid to speak his mind. The one who challenged the world around him was there. His hands were shaking, and his voice cracked when he spoke. "I can't do this anymore," he said, his voice raw, desperate. "Please, you have to help me. I don't know what they did to me. I can feel myself slipping away." I stepped closer, my heart racing. "Kanye, you can fight this. You can get through it. We can fix this. I know we can."
But just as quickly as the old Kanye had returned, he was gone again. His expression shifted, becoming blank once more. The words didn't even seem to register with him anymore. He turned his head slowly, as if I was nothing more than an echo in the room, and said in that same monotone voice, "I'm fine. I'm good. This is who I'm supposed to be." His gaze locked onto mine, but it wasn't him looking at me anymore. It was something else, something controlled, something cold. And I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. I had failed him. The real Kanye, the person I had worked with for years, was gone. And what was left was just an empty vessel. A vessel they had created. But even though Kanye was slipping further into this mechanical shell, I still saw the smallest flicker of resistance, the smallest bit of his true self still fighting to break through. It was so faint, so fleeting, but it was there. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't give up on him. I couldn't just let him go. I started digging into the tech company that had done this to him. I needed answers. I needed to know how to fix this, how to save him. But every lead I followed only took me deeper into their web, deeper into the nightmare they had created. The company had too much power, too many resources, too many people involved. There was no way to undo what had been done to Kanye. The more I dug, the more I realized I wasn't just up against a tech company. I was up against a system that had no conscience, no morality, and no boundaries. Kanye was just the beginning. And once they were done with him, they would move on to others. More celebrities, more influencers, more public figures. They would control them all, rewrite their minds, erase their true selves. And I was just standing there, powerless, watching it all unfold. The more I uncovered, the more I realized the truth. This wasn't just about Kanye. This was about control. A control that reached farther than I could ever imagine. And I was just beginning to understand the scale of what they were capable of. I couldn't stop thinking about Kanye. What had happened to him? The man who once defied every boundary, every expectation, was gone, swallowed by a cold, mechanical version of himself. I had to know what had caused it, who was behind it. Every fiber of my being screamed for answers, and so I started digging. At first, it seemed like a simple task, just a few clicks, a few phone calls. But the deeper I went, the more I realized how much I was up against. The company behind Kanye's reprogramming wasn't just any tech startup. They were the shadowy hands pulling strings behind some of the world's most influential figures. No one knew their name, not really. They operated under the radar, quietly inserting themselves into the lives of the powerful. They weren't just offering services to celebrities. They were altering their minds. I had to get in. I had to find out who they were, what they had done to Kanye, and how far they planned to take it. But the further I dug, the darker it got.
I made my first mistake when I tried to track down one of the technicians who had been involved in Kanye's reprogramming. He was a young guy, nervous with the look of someone who knew he was in too deep. I managed to find his name, then his address. A part of me, maybe the last shred of sanity I had left, felt guilty for even considering it. But what choice did I have? The truth had to come out. I needed to get to him before they shut him down, just like they had Kanye. When I knocked on his door, the man who opened it wasn't the nervous kid I had imagined. He was different, too calm, too perfect. His smile didn't reach his eyes. The first thing I noticed when I stepped inside was the faint hum of machines. It wasn't a recording studio. It wasn't an office. It was something else. Something much more sinister.
"Come in," he said, motioning to the seat across from him.
I didn't sit. Something was wrong. Something was off. I could feel it. "What do you know about Kanye?" I asked, my voice coming out stronger than I felt. The man's smile never faltered. "I know more than you could possibly imagine," he said. "But that doesn't matter. What matters is what you're willing to do for the truth." I didn't have time for his cryptic nonsense. "Tell me what you did to him." The man's eyes flickered just for a moment, but it was enough. "You don't understand," he said. "We didn't do anything to him. We helped him become what he was always meant to be." Those words hit me like a slap across the face. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "He's not himself anymore. He's not even alive inside his own head. He's a shell." He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "You think this is something new? You think Kanye is the first to go through this? We've been doing this for years. We're reshaping the world one mind at a time. And Kanye was just the first. He's a pioneer." The weight of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. They weren't just altering minds. They were controlling them, rewriting the very essence of who people were. The tech company was more than just a corporation. It was an unstoppable force with no moral compass, no concern for what they were destroying. They were creating a new world, one where the masses were nothing more than puppets, and the people pulling the strings were hidden in the shadows. I could feel the walls closing in on me. I was in too deep, and I couldn't back out. I had to know what they had done to Kanye and what they were planning next. The man across from me wasn't about to give up the details willingly, but I could see the flicker of fear in his eyes. He knew something I didn't, and I wasn't about to let him walk away without telling me what that was.
"Tell me everything," I demanded, "or I'll expose you. I'll expose this entire operation."
His smile faded slightly, replaced by a look of cold calculation. "You're not going to expose anything," he said, voice low. "You're too far in, and you can't stop what's already started." I took a step forward, anger fueling me. "I'll make sure everyone knows what you're doing. I'll bring this whole damn thing down."
But his expression didn't change. "You really think that's possible? Do you know how many people are involved in this? Do you have any idea how far this goes?" He paused, watching me carefully. "You're nothing. Just one person who knows a fraction of the truth. You can't stop us." I froze, the weight of his words sinking in. I wasn't just up against a tech company. I was up against an entire system, a network of power so vast that a single person couldn't even scratch the surface.
Kanye had been their first victim, but there would be more. And they had the resources to silence anyone who got too close. Before I could respond, he stood up and walked toward the door, signaling that the conversation was over. This isn't something you can change, but you can still be useful. If you want to help yourself, you'll stop digging. Walk away. Let it go. His cold smile was the last thing I saw before the door slammed shut behind him. I was left standing there, my heart racing, my mind reeling from the implications of what he'd just said. The world had changed, and I had just stumbled into the eye of a storm that was bigger than anything I could have ever imagined. But I couldn't let it go. Not now. Not after seeing what they'd done to Kanye. They had erased his soul, and they would do the same to others. They were manipulating the minds of the most influential figures on the planet, and no one knew. I had to find a way to stop them.
But the more I uncovered, the more I realized that I wasn't just dealing with a tech company. I was dealing with a power that controlled everything.
I was in too deep now. The truth was bigger than Kanye. It was about control. And the deeper I dug, the more I understood. They weren't just taking Kanye. They were taking everyone. The weight of what I had uncovered began to crush me. I had thought that uncovering the truth would give me power, that knowing what had happened to Kanye would allow me to stop it. But instead, I felt more powerless than ever. The deeper I dug into the tech company's operations, the more I realized how far-reaching their influence was. They didn't just have Kanye, they had everyone. I couldn't let go of the image of Kanye's blank stare, the emptiness that now filled his eyes. The old Kanye, the one who would challenge everything and everyone, had been erased. What was left was a man who merely went through the motions, a puppet with invisible strings pulling him in every direction. And worse yet, I knew there would be more. They weren't stopping with him. They were working their way through the highest echelons of fame, taking control of the minds of the people we looked up to, and no one even knew it was happening. I knew that the time had come to act. I had to find a way to break Kanye free from the machine that had stolen him from himself. But how could I? The system they had put in place was far too complex, too powerful for one person to defeat. And what if the system had already broken him beyond repair? What if he was already lost forever? The first step was obvious: confront the tech company. But I couldn't just waltz in and demand answers. I wasn't that naive. I had to be smart, calculated. The last thing I needed was to be caught in their web, too. They were watching me, tracking my every move, every inquiry, and I knew it was only a matter of time before they figured out that I was a threat. I spent the next few days gathering every scrap of information I could find. I reached out to people who had worked with the company, trying to find any weaknesses in their operations. But all I found were walls, dead ends, unanswered questions. The company had insulated itself in layers of secrecy, and anyone who had ever tried to dig into them had vanished into the abyss, their names erased from existence. It was clear that the tech company was more than just a business. It was a machine that took what it wanted and discarded anything in its path.
But there was one thing I didn't count on: Kanye. He wasn't gone, not entirely. The moments when he fought against the programming were brief, fleeting, but they were there. Every now and then, when I caught him alone, I would see a flicker of the old Kanye. His eyes would soften, his lips would tremble as if he were trying to say something he couldn't. It was as if the real Kanye was still locked inside, struggling to break free. But the chains were tightening with every passing day.
I had to act fast. One night, I managed to get a message through to him. A simple note slipped under his door. I didn't expect him to reply, but I needed to know if there was any part of him left that could help. The note said, "I know you're still in there. Don't give up. Fight it." I left it on the table and walked away, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know if the message would reach him or if it would even matter, but I had to try. Hours passed before I got a response. I was pacing in my apartment, replaying every conversation I'd had with him, every moment I had seen him slip further into the machine. Then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. They're listening. They know. My blood ran cold. The message was short, cryptic, but it confirmed everything I feared. I had been right. They were watching. Every step I took to uncover the truth had been tracked. And now, they were closing in. I didn't have much time. I rushed to Kanye's place, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. What if it was too late? What if he couldn't hear me anymore? What if I had waited too long?
When I arrived, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, but the room was empty. My heart sank. I knew something was wrong, but I wasn't prepared for the sight that greeted me. Kanye was sitting in the middle of the room, eyes closed, completely still. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, but there was no emotion in his face. He looked like a mannequin. The machine had done its work.
I rushed to him, shaking his shoulder, calling his name. "Kanye, wake up! Please wake up!" But he didn't respond. It was like I was calling to a ghost, begging for the man I once knew to come back. Then a faint whisper, almost drowned out by the hum of the machine, escaped his lips. "Help me." I froze. It was him. It was Kanye. His voice, weak and broken, was the only sign that the real him hadn't been completely erased. He was still there, trapped beneath the layers of the machine. But how could I help him? How could I tear down this fortress they had built around him? As I sat there, tears welling up in my eyes, I realized something. This was bigger than Kanye. This wasn't just about saving him. It was about stopping the machine. It was about exposing them, taking down the very system that had turned him into a shell of a man. But I couldn't do it alone. I couldn't fight this battle without help. I couldn't let Kanye be the last. The stakes had never been higher. I knew what I had to do. I had to break Kanye free, but in doing so, I would have to go up against the most dangerous force I had ever encountered. An enemy that would stop at nothing to keep their grip on the world. And if I failed, Kanye wouldn't be the only one to lose everything.
I couldn't stop thinking about the moment I'd shared with Kanye. "Help me," he had whispered. It was a cry for help from the deepest part of his soul, one that was still fighting to break free, even as the machine continued to tighten its grip. But that moment was fading, slipping through my fingers like water. I had to act quickly. The clock was ticking, and the more time I wasted, the more the tech company gained ground. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just watch Kanye disappear. I couldn't leave him like this. But breaking him free from the grip of the tech company wouldn't be easy. They had everything locked down. Security, surveillance, everything was monitored. If I tried to intervene without the right plan, I'd be walking straight into a trap. The company had eyes everywhere. I made my first move by gathering intel. I hacked into the company's security systems, trying to find a weak spot.
any flaw in their operation. It wasn't easy. Their security was unlike anything I'd ever encountered. Complex firewalls, encrypted servers, and surveillance cameras in every corner of their building. But I was determined. I had to find a way in, and I had to do it fast. It took days of careful planning, of hacking into systems and slowly weaving through the digital labyrinth they had created. I had to be careful. One wrong move and I'd be caught. But eventually, I found it. A backdoor entry. A forgotten vulnerability in their system that hadn't been patched up. It was a small window of opportunity, but it was enough. With my heart pounding, I got to work. I disabled their security cameras, manipulated the surveillance feeds, and snuck through their firewalls. It was like walking through a maze in the dark, not knowing what dangers lay around the corner. But I pushed forward. I had to, for Kanye. I finally reached the building's lower levels, where they kept the most sensitive equipment, the systems that controlled the reprogramming process. The place was eerily quiet, devoid of the usual hum of activity I'd expected. It was almost as if they were waiting for something. Waiting for me.
I moved swiftly, my footsteps silent against the cold concrete floor. But as I approached the reprogramming chamber, the place where Kanye had been altered, I felt a sudden surge of dread. I had no idea what I was walking into, but I couldn't stop now. I had to get Kanye out. I had to undo what they had done to him.
I pushed open the heavy metal door. The room was bathed in an unnatural, sterile light. Machines lined the walls, their hums filling the air. And there, in the center of the room, sat Kanye. His body was slumped, his face expressionless. He didn't look like the man I once knew. He looked broken. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to do. I moved quickly, disconnecting the wires from his body and shutting down the machines. The moment I did, the silence in the room was deafening. I stood there, looking at him, waiting for some sign that he was still with me. For a few moments, nothing happened. I was about to give up, about to walk away, thinking maybe it was too late, maybe there was no way back. But then, his fingers twitched. His chest rose and fell with a shallow breath. It wasn't much, but it was something. The real Kanye was still there, buried beneath the programming. I rushed to his side, shaking him gently. "Kanye," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Kanye, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was recognition in them. His lips parted and he tried to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, he simply looked at me, his gaze full of fear, confusion, and the faintest hint of desperation. "Please," he whispered, his voice hoarse, barely audible. I can't fight it anymore." I leaned in closer, my heart breaking at the sound of his voice. "You can, Kanye. You're still in there. You just have to fight. You have to remember who you are." But it wasn't that simple. The machine, the tech, the reprogramming, it had already dug too deep into his mind. Even now, as I looked into his eyes, I could see the conflict within him. He was fighting, but it was like trying to hold back a flood. Every ounce of his being was screaming for help, but the system was overwhelming him. "I'm sorry," he gasped, his voice barely a whisper. I tried to hold on, but they took everything. It was the moment I had feared. The moment I realized that even though Kanye was still there, the damage had already been done. The real Kanye, the one who had challenged everything, who had created magic with his words and music, he was gone. The man in front of me was a ghost of his former self, a prisoner trapped inside a machine.
I won't leave you, I promised, my voice breaking. I'll find a way to fix this. I'll get you out. You don't have to be this way. But deep down, I knew the truth that I hadn't wanted to face. Even if I managed to get Kanye out of this room, even if I broke him free from the machines, it didn't mean he'd ever be the same again. They had rewritten him, had taken the very essence of who he was. And I wasn't sure that anyone, not even me, could bring that back. Before I could say anything else, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. Someone was coming. My heart skipped a beat as I looked back at Kanye, who seemed to understand. The fear in his eyes was palpable. He knew we didn't have much time. We need to go, I whispered. But Kanye didn't move. He was too far gone. I could feel it. His mind was slipping further away with every passing second. But just as I was about to make my escape, the door burst open. The techs had found us, and there was no way out. The nightmare wasn't over yet. It had only just begun. The door slammed open, and I froze. A group of techs stood in the doorway, their eyes hidden behind dark glasses, their expressions unreadable. My heart pounded in my chest, every muscle screaming for me to run, to get Kanye out of there. But it was too late. I was already caught. We were both trapped.
I glanced at Kanye. His eyes were wide with fear, but there was nothing in them that resembled the man I knew. He was broken, too far gone. The fight inside him had dwindled, and I couldn't even be sure if he could hear me anymore. One of the techs stepped forward, his movements calm and calculated. "You've seen too much," he said, his voice cold, devoid of emotion. "It's time to go." I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. The tech company had won. They had taken Kanye, and now they were coming for me. Every step I had taken to expose the truth, every moment I had spent trying to fight back, it had all been for nothing. The system was too big, too powerful. It wasn't something a single person could fight. I looked around the room one last time, taking in the sterile machines, the cold walls that had held Kanye captive. This was it. This was the end. There was no escape, no way to make things right. The real Kanye was gone, and what was left was just a product, something that the tech company had perfected and sold to the public as if nothing had changed. The world would never know the truth. They would never know what had happened to him, what had happened to all of them. The techs began to move toward me, their hands reaching for me, their eyes emotionless. I felt the cold grip of dread squeeze my chest. I wanted to fight back. I wanted to scream, to fight for Kanye, for everything that had been taken from him. But I knew it was pointless. They were too strong, too organized. The only thing I had left was the truth. But it was a truth no one would ever hear. I took one last look at Kanye. He was still sitting there, his face blank, a faraway look in his eyes. There was nothing left of the genius, the fire that had once defined him. The machine had consumed him, and there was no coming back from it. As they led me out of the room, I felt my heart shatter. I had failed. I had failed him. The worst part? The world would never know the truth. They would continue to idolize Kanye, worshiping the image they had been fed, while the real man, the one who had fought, struggled, and created, was gone. Lost to a system that rewrites minds, erases souls, and keeps the truth hidden in the shadows. I was just one more casualty in a war no one even knew existed. The tech company had won, and I had nothing left to give but the memory of what Kanye had once been. But even as I walked away, I knew deep down I wasn't the only one they'd taken, and I wouldn't be the last.